Hey guys, tonight we drift back to the moment when humanity first got tipsy, long before neon signs, bartenders, or even written words. Picture yourself in a damp prehistoric valley where the air smells of wet soil and wild grass. You squat beside a cracked clay pot, curiosity tugging at you as something inside fizzes faintly, bubbling with a scent that's oddly sweet. You don't know it yet, but that smell, yeast doing its microscopic dance, will change the entire story of civilization. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I love hearing where you're tuning in from, so drop your city and local time down below in the comments. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You reach for that pot, still warm from the afternoon sun. It's filled with half-rotted fruit. Figs, maybe dates, that some curious ancestor had mashed and forgotten. When you take a cautious sip, the taste jolts your tongue. It's sour and strange, but oddly delightful. And then, oh, there it is. The faint spin behind your eyes, the flush of warmth in your chest, and the silly grin you can't quite explain. That's the first drunk moment in history, and you're living it. The earliest traces of alcohol date back over 9,000 years, found in the sticky residue of pottery from Jiahu, a Neolithic village in what's now China. The brew, a strange blend of rice, honey and fruit, part beer, part wine, part mystery. Historians still argue whether it was discovered by accident or by curiosity. But one thing's sure, once humans realized that fermentation could make life a little fuzzier around the edges, they never looked back. You imagine the first time that realization spread. A tribe gathers at dusk, passing around a clay bowl, laughing louder, singing longer. There's a warmth, not just from the fire, but from the shared euphoria that hums between them. Communication loosens. The world softens. Maybe someone confesses love, maybe another accidentally falls into the fire. Either way, the group feels more connected, more alive. The seeds of what we now call social drinking sprouted right there in the mud. That ancient intoxication wasn't just a party trick. It was survival strategy. Imagine water sources crawling with bacteria. A fermented drink, mildly alcoholic, low in pathogens, was safer than most rivers. So, in a funny twist, getting a little buzzed might have been humanity's first public health policy. And here's your first quirky tidbit. Some anthropologists suggest elephants. Monkeys and even birds have joined the party too, seeking out fermented fruit just to feel that giddy edge. Drunken parrots in the Amazon? Check. Elephants raiding marula trees in Africa? Oh, absolutely. So when you sip that beer today, you're basically sharing a 60 million year-old pastime with wildlife. You crouch by that ancient campfire, watching your companions grow rowdier. One of them starts to beat a rhythm on a hollow log, another claps along, and just like that, music is born. Or maybe, alcohol gave rhythm the courage to step out of silence. Scientists believe early fermentation may have encouraged the growth of symbolic culture. Songs, rituals, even proto-religion. Because when the world starts spinning gently, you tend to see patterns in stars and purpose in chaos. Fast forward a few centuries, or a few thousand, and you follow this bubbling curiosity into the first makeshift settlements. Picture mud huts clustered near riverbanks, grains drying on flat stones, and a few curious minds noticing that rainwater mixed with stored seeds gives off that same sweet, sour tang. They try again, intentionally this time. Clay jars become little laboratories. Fermentation becomes art. In Sumer, people began using clay tokens to track beer rations. Imagine that. The world's first accounting system may have been born from hangovers. Historians still argue whether Mesopotamian beer culture sparked bureaucracy itself. You can almost hear an ancient brewer shouting, "Hey, who drank my daily portion?" And a scribe replying, Don't worry, I've invented math to fix it. You walk through those early villages, noticing that fermentation is everywhere. Bread rising, milk soaring, fruits bubbling. The same invisible process that made life's food unpredictable also made it magical. And the idea that something unseen, yeast, we now know, could transform the ordinary into something extraordinary gave rise to early notions of spirit and mystery. They literally called it spirit, long before distillation existed, as if each fermented drink carried the breath of gods. Your imagination drifts to an ancient woman. Archaeologists think women brewed most early beer. She squats by her pot, humming softly, tasting, adjusting, perfecting. It's domestic alchemy, every bubble a secret message from nature. Without realizing it, she's pioneering both chemistry and community bonding. The gentle sarcasm in your inner narrator whispers, "You probably wouldn't survive this party." True enough. Without refrigeration, yeast control, or germ theory, every batch was a gamble. Too little fermentation, and you'd just get sour soup. Too much, and you might poison yourself. Still, they kept trying, because the reward was warmth, laughter, and brief escape from the grind of existence. Picture a night after the harvest. The air is cool, the fields empty, and the villagers gather in a circle. Someone pours golden liquid into carved gourds. The conversation turns silly. Someone tells a story that grows wilder with every retelling. A woman bursts into laughter, so contagious it echoes through the valley. That, right there, is the first recorded sound of cheers. The ritual of drinking together likely did more for social bonding than any tool or weapon. It broke barriers, encouraged trust, and made cooperation, hunting, farming, even forming families, easier. You can feel that soft fuzz in your head, turning strangers into companions. Alcohol didn't just change chemistry, it rewired culture. And yet, even back then, there was a shadow. Some people couldn't stop. They'd overindulge, stumble into the fire, or forget their tasks the next day. Others mocked them, yet couldn't resist joining them. Historians still argue whether early societies saw drunkenness as divine or dangerous. Both, probably, a gift from the gods, but one that could turn you into a fool. The night deepens. You lie back under a dark Neolithic sky, the stars swimming lazily, as if they too were tipsy. Your head hums, your heart slows, and the world feels just right, like every worry's been diluted by laughter and fermented fruit. For that fleeting moment, you understand why humans never stopped chasing this feeling. Thousands of years later, when archaeologists scrape those ancient pots, they find residues, microscopic traces of the world's first buzz. They find honey wine, rice beer, fruit mead, barley mash. Each one a time capsule of joy and chaos, proof that even before writing, we were already telling our story through what we drank. And tonight, as you listen, you can almost smell that ancient sweetness, earthy, tangy, alive. You can taste the curiosity that pushed humanity forward, one unsteady sip at a time. Tomorrow, we'll wander into fields of grain and vineyards of promise, where intoxication grows more refined, but never less human. You wake to a soft sunrise over endless fields of barley, the earth damp beneath your bare feet. The air smells faintly of grain, yeast, and promise. Civilization has started to settle. No more constant wandering, or guessing where your next meal comes from. And with that calm, you notice something quietly revolutionary happening. Humans are no longer just finding their drinks by accident. They're making them on purpose. You kneel beside a basket of ripened wheat. The stalks shimmer gold in the morning light, and as you crush a few kernels between your palms, you realize these little seeds are the keys to consistency. Add water, warmth, and time, and you don't just get food, you get beer. Thick, hearty, gently intoxicating beer. The kind that doesn't just nourish, but makes your brain hum pleasantly while you gossip about who stole, whose goat. Beer might just be the world's oldest recipe, The Sumerians, those same inventive folks who gave us writing and calendars, were brewing it by around 5000 BCE. You'd probably like their approach. Communal, messy, and a little gross. Picture this: huge clay vats bubbling away in the open air, covered with floating bread loaves that act like yeast starters. People lean in with reed straws, sipping together from the same pot. You can almost hear the laughter and the slurps. Historians still argue whether beer inspired farming or the other way around. Some believe humans began cultivating grains not for bread, but for booze. Imagine that. Civilization born because someone didn't want the party to end. It's the kind of logic that sounds silly until you realize we've been doing the same thing for millennia, inventing technology to make good times last just a little longer. As you wander through these early brewing villages, you can sense the shift. Alcohol isn't just a happy accident anymore, it's a tool. Workers get a daily beer ration, thick like porridge, packed with calories. It's liquid bread, literally. Even children drink it. And because the alcohol kills bacteria, it's safer than water from the canals. This isn't hedonism. It's hydration with benefits. There's a strange beauty in watching this new rhythm of life unfold. Beer becomes part of the day's punctuation marks. Morning brew, noon rest, evening reward. It marks time the same way bells would later mark hours. The village hums to its rhythm. Then, somewhere west, the grapes begin their slow ripening revolution. In the hills of the Caucasus and the sunlit valleys of ancient Persia, you watch people pluck grapes and press them in hollowed logs. The juice, left to sit, turns alive, bubbling, fizzing, darkening. Wine is born, and the world suddenly has a new symbol of status and spirituality. Wine changes everything. It's elegant, portable, and potent in a way beer never quite manages. You imagine the first vineyard keepers, faces browned by sun, hands sticky with juice, sniffing their fermented prize and feeling a flicker of awe. The taste of control. The ability to create something divine from soil and patience. By the time the Egyptians refine brewing and winemaking, alcohol has become civilization's mirror. In their murals, you see banquets bursting with color, flute players, dancers, and servants pouring jars of frothy beer into golden cups. Pharaohs drink wine perfumed with herbs, while workers on the pyramids gulp down daily beer rations to fuel their labor. One papyrus recipe even describes beer made from dates and barley, a sweet, sticky hybrid that probably went down like dessert. Your inner host chuckles softly. You'd fit right in. But maybe don't drink the Nile version. It's got hints of crocodile. Still, you can't help but admire their dedication. Brewing wasn't a side hustle. It was an essential craft. Temples managed recipes, priests oversaw distribution, and drunk festivals celebrated gods like Hathor, goddess of joy and intoxication. Here's your mainstream historical fact. The Epic of Gilgamesh, humanity's oldest written story, includes a scene where a wild man named Enkidu becomes civilized after drinking beer. 6 jars of it, to be precise. He goes from beast to human in a single sitting. The message: to drink is to join society, to share in the rituals that define what it means to be. Now for the quirky tidbit. Some archaeologists have found evidence that ancient winemakers in Georgia used beeswax to seal jars, and sometimes dropped in animal bones for flavor. That's right, prehistoric bone wine. Think of it as the ancestor of today's smoky tasting notes, though a bit more literal. You can almost hear the world fermenting itself into complexity. Every new recipe is a whisper of innovation. People mix grains with fruit, fruit with honey, honey with herbs. Spices from trade routes add intrigue. You start to see alcohol becoming identity, each culture with its signature sip. You wander next into Greece, where symposiums, the original after-hours debates, echo through marble halls. Men recline on couches, sipping diluted wine, yes, always mixed with water, Drinking it straight was barbaric, while musicians plucked gentle melodies. Discussions drift between politics, poetry, and philosophy. Alcohol isn't just for fun, it's lubrication for ideas. Yet the Greeks knew its dangers too. Dionysus, their god of wine, was both ecstatic and terrifying. His followers might dance in joyful frenzy one moment and spiral into chaos the next. That duality, pleasure and peril, stayed baked into our relationship with alcohol forever. You can almost feel the tug: one more cup, one more song, one more step toward losing yourself. Historians still argue whether wine's dominance was cultural destiny or just convenience of climate. Grapes grew easily in Mediterranean soil, but there's also evidence of early beer festivals, even in regions where vineyards thrived. The truth might be both. Humans simply loved choice, and intoxication found any path it could. Meanwhile, across the sea, you find the Celts brewing ale thick enough to chew, served in wooden cups during raucous feasts. In the Americas, maize beer, chicha, was already central to ceremony. In China, millet wine fermented in earthenware jars became tribute to ancestors. No matter where you go, humans seem to arrive at the same conclusion. Life's better with a buzz. You watch these worlds spin together. The fields, the presses, the vats, and realize how alcohol shaped time itself. It demanded patience. Fermentation taught humans to wait, to plan, to measure. In chasing intoxication, they accidentally invented foresight. And somewhere, as night falls again, you're back at that fire. Someone passes you a cup of something sweet, the taste of fruit and smoke. It's rough, warm, and alive. You drink, and once again, you're part of that endless human loop. The search for comfort, for community, for something that makes the edges of existence blur, just enough to feel manageable. As stars glint overhead, you think, maybe the real secret isn't what's in the cup. But what happens when we share it? You're back in the cool dimness of a stone temple, the air thick with incense and the murmurs of prayer. Light filters through narrow slits, catching on golden cups lined neatly on an altar. The scent of fermentation is faint, but familiar, sweet, heady, earthy. Somewhere in this silence, you realize something monumental. Alcohol has climbed from the muddy floors of early villages into the polished hands of priests. It has become sacred. You move closer. A priest in Mesopotamian linen robes carefully pours dark beer into a basin. He's not drinking it, he's offering it. The foam trembles like breath. For the Sumerians, beer wasn't just a drink, it was a bridge between humans and gods. Their goddess Ninkasi, the divine brewer, had entire hymns dedicated to her recipes. One cuneiform tablet, the famous hymn to Ninkasi, is basically the world's first home brewing manual wrapped in a song of praise. You can picture it. Lines of women pounding barley, singing to keep rhythm, their chants echoing off clay walls. It's not just work, it's ritual. Every bubble, every yeast bloom, a sacred act. Because when something gives you warmth, laughter, and the illusion of transcendence, it naturally feels divine. You watch as a temple feast begins. Long tables stretch under torchlight. Cups are filled, prayers murmured, and a priest blesses the brew. Then everyone drinks. Not greedily, but ceremonially, letting the warmth ripple through them like holy fire. You sip too, and for a heartbeat, you understand why this became religion's favorite tool. It's communion, centuries before the word existed. Ancient Egypt takes the devotion even further. Imagine festivals honoring Hathor, the goddess of love, music, and intoxication. At her great celebration, the Feast of Drunkenness, thousands of Egyptians gathered, drank beer dyed red with pomegranate juice, and danced until the line between joy and exhaustion vanished. The myth behind it. Hathor once set out to destroy humanity, but was tricked into drinking a vat of red, dyed beer, mistaking it for blood. She got drunk, fell asleep, and woke up peaceful. From then on, her followers celebrated by reenacting her hangover, minus the apocalypse. Your inner voice chuckles. You'd call that self-care weekend. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Alcohol offerings were common in nearly every ancient civilization. Egyptian tombs, Greek temples, Roman altars. Archaeologists have found amphorae of wine, buried beside kings and warriors, intended as provisions for the afterlife. Death was a journey, and you couldn't travel empty-handed. As you wander among hieroglyphs and amphorae, you notice something profound. Alcohol isn't just a beverage anymore, it's a narrative device. It tells stories of creation, destruction, and rebirth. The gods drink, the priests sanctify, and the people follow. Even early Christian rites later inherited that same rhythm: body, blood, bread, and wine. Symbols fermented in human memory long before religion organized them. But here's your quirky tidbit. Some Egyptian priests, despite their strict diets, brewed temple beer. That was so strong it doubled as anesthesia. They used it during minor surgeries or mummification rituals, not just for the patients, but sometimes for themselves, because cutting into eternity required steady hands and numbed nerves. You walk now through the ziggurats of Mesopotamia and temples of Thebes, seeing how alcohol tied labor and faith together. Workers received beer as payment. Priests controlled its distribution. It wasn't just a drink, it was power. Whoever managed fermentation managed loyalty. You can almost hear whispers in the dark corners of the temple storerooms, where surplus beer meant wealth and scarcity meant revolt. Historians still argue whether religion created alcohol's ritual importance, or if alcohol inspired religious ritual itself. It's the old chicken and egg debate. Only this time, the chicken is drunk and the egg is fermenting. The Greeks took it all to a new theatrical level. Their god Dionysus wasn't a distant deity in marble. He was chaos incarnate. His followers, the Maenads, danced wildly in the woods, draped in ivy. Their hands sticky with wine and fruit. They claimed to merge with the god through ecstatic drinking, to dissolve individuality and become divine. You can almost hear the flute music, the rustle of leaves, the laugh that turns into a cry. It's half celebration, half surrender. At first, you might think it's madness. But then again, isn't that what people still chase? That moment when the self dissolves, when life feels bigger, rounder, easier. Dionysus just gave that chaos a name. Over in Rome, Bacchus, his Latin cousin, takes the idea and multiplies it. Roman banquets become the height of social display. You recline on couches, wine flowing freely as slaves pour and poets perform. Laughter rises like smoke, and yet, even the Romans knew how fine the line was. Too much, and you were mocked for being a fool. Too little, and you were uptight. Moderation, they said, was the divine balance, but nobody ever quite managed it. You take a sip from a silver goblet. The wine's thick and spiced with herbs. It's probably diluted, but the warmth spreads fast. The Roman host beside you leans in, whispering advice. Drink enough to be honest, not enough to be immortal. You nod, pretending to understand, though your head already swims. Here's the thing. Intoxication was never just about pleasure. It was about connection between people and the divine, between body and story. Ancient societies used alcohol to define time, festivals, harvests, new moons. It was woven into marriage, birth, death. You couldn't mark life's turning points without raising a cup. And for a moment, you realize, this wasn't addiction, it was architecture. Rituals gave people boundaries, rules for indulgence. You drank when it was time to honor, not escape. You shared, not hid. But there's always the outlier. The one who drinks outside the ritual, who seeks the feeling without the reason. Somewhere, in every culture, that person exists, the first solitary drinker. Maybe it's a priest sneaking wine in the cellar. Maybe a farmer drowning loss. You can feel empathy stretching across centuries. The same comfort, the same danger. As the night deepens in this imagined temple world, torches flicker low, and the last cup's empty. The air smells of smoke, resin, and yeast. The priests begin to chant softly, their words lilting and repetitive. The sound blends with your heartbeat until it's impossible to tell where ritual ends and reality begins. You close your eyes, swaying gently. Maybe you understand now why it never stopped, why we kept brewing, pouring, praying, and drinking. Because each sip wasn't just escape. It was connection. To earth, to gods, each other. The chant fades, replaced by the rustle of wind through reeds, and for a moment, you're alone again. Just you, the taste of old wine on your lips, and the slow, sacred rhythm of fermentation that's been echoing for 10,000 years. You wake up beside a flickering fire, the air sharp with herbs, smoke, and something faintly medicinal. The clay cup in your hands isn't for celebration tonight. It's for healing. The drink burns your throat slightly, bitter yet comforting. Somewhere nearby, an old healer hums to herself as she grinds roots into a mortar. You've stepped into the world where alcohol stopped being just ritual and became remedy. Humans have always had that clever instinct. If something changes the way you feel, maybe it can cure the way you hurt. And so, alcohol, the same potion that made people sing and dance, also became one of the first medicines. You can picture it: ancient apothecaries, their shelves lined with bottles of fermented fruit and grain, each tagged not by name, but by what it could fix. It started simple. You cut your hand, pour a little beer or wine on it. It stings, but it doesn't fester. Got a toothache? Swish some wine, the pain dulls, your breath smells fancy. Fever. A sip to sweat it out. Heartache. A few more sips until the edges blur. By trial, error, and hangovers, humanity began its first experiments in anesthesia. Here's your mainstream historical fact. By the time of the ancient Egyptians and Greeks, alcohol was listed in medical papyri and herbal manuals as a legitimate treatment. Hippocrates, the so-called father of modern medicine, prescribed wine for wounds, digestive troubles, excess of black bile. Essentially, if you were sad or sore, he'd hand you a drink and call it therapy. But the real magic, if you can call it that, lay in the mixture. Alcohol was a solvent, perfect for extracting oils and essences from plants. You can imagine the scene: jars of wine infused with rosemary, garlic, opium, or mandrake root. The workshop smells like a cross between a tavern and a witch's garden. Steam rises from clay kettles, pestles tap rhythmically. Science and sorcery share the same cup. You glance at the healer again. Her eyes are bright, her hands steady despite the dim light. She pours something greenish into a bowl, mutters a few words, and hands it to a trembling patient. The man drinks, grimaces, then slowly relaxes. The hum of the fire, the faint buzz of alcohol. It's not just the medicine working, it's the ritual. The comfort of being cared for. And here's your quirky tidbit: in Babylon, around 2000 BCE, doctors sometimes prescribe beer enemas. Yes, really. The idea was to cleanse the inner heat. It's both horrifying and oddly innovative, though not one you'll find on modern pharmacy shelves. You wander through time again, stopping next in an early Celtic hut where the smell of mead fills the air. The Druids believed it was divine medicine, brewed under moonlight and stirred with silver spoons. They'd use it to bless newborns, anoint the dying, and, in between, treat pretty much every symptom the human body could produce. In ancient India, the Ayurvedic texts describe sura, a fermented barley drink, as both healing and dangerous depending on balance. Too much, one verse warns, and the soul departs its reason. But just enough, and it warms the spirit and renews courage. You smile, because that's been humanity's hang up ever since. How much is enough? Historians still argue whether early medicine truly helped or was just ritual placebo. But one thing's clear: alcohol's dual nature kept it alive in every culture. It could clean wounds and cause them. It could numb pain and create it. The perfect paradox in a cup. Your inner host voice returns, soft and wry. You probably wouldn't survive this ancient pharmacy. Half their remedies worked. The other half just worked you over. The Greek physicians expanded the playbook. Galen, the Roman doctor who treated gladiators, swore by wine for disinfecting battle wounds. Picture it. He's standing over a bleeding fighter, calmly pouring strong red wine into the gash, while muttering that it'll sting. Only a little. The patient screams. Galen nods approvingly. Good. That means it's working. For centuries, alcohol remained the cornerstone of treatment. When medieval monks brewed beer, they weren't just quenching thirst. They were crafting tonics. Monasteries became the pharmaceutical labs of their day, their brews infused with mint, sage, or bitter wormwood. These concoctions laid the foundation for modern spirits like Benedictine and Chartreuse. Monks might have claimed they brewed for the glory of God. But deep down, they knew they were also making people's aches fade and their evenings merrier. By the Middle Ages, the line between medicine and pleasure blurred completely. Apothecaries sold aquavita, the water of life, a strong distilled spirit thought to preserve youth and cure plague. People believed it could drive away demons, both the invisible and the emotional kind. You can almost hear the sales pitch. Drink this, and your soul will feel lighter. They weren't wrong. And that's where the real revolution begins. Somewhere in a smoky alchemist chamber, someone figures out how to refine alcohol. Boiling, cooling, condensing, to create something far stronger. Distillation. The world doesn't know it yet, but that discovery will change everything from medicine to warfare to weekend plans. For now, though, we stay in this half-magical, half-medical era. You stand in a medieval infirmary, the stone walls cool, the air thick with vinegar and herbs. A monk approaches a patient burning with fever, lifts a cup of spiced wine, and whispers a prayer before pouring it gently past cracked lips. The patient sighs. Maybe it's the alcohol easing the pain. Maybe it's the human kindness behind the gesture. Both, perhaps. Even in the Islamic Golden Age, where drinking was generally forbidden, distillation continued, just not for fun. Scholars like Jaber ibn Hayyan perfected the process to make perfumes, medicines, and antiseptics. There, cool, the purified essence, gave us both the word alcohol and the science of chemistry itself. You realize, even when humans try to quit drinking, they end up inventing it anew. Historians still argue whether that cross-cultural exchange between spiritual restraint and scientific curiosity was what allowed distillation to spread across Europe later. But the irony is delicious. A world that tried to control alcohol ended up refining it into its purest, most powerful form. Back in your seat by the fire, the healer passes you one last cup. The taste is strange, herbal sharp. A live drink, she says softly, not for pleasure, but to remember. You do, and the warmth spreads from your chest to your fingertips. The pain of the day softens. The world blurs just enough. And as your eyelids grow heavy, you understand something the ancients already knew. Alcohol's greatest medicine wasn't what it did to the body, but what it did to the mind. It soothed fear, dulled grief, gave courage, and whispered that tomorrow might still be survivable. The fire crackles lower. Outside, the night hums. You exhale slowly, feeling that familiar peace that every generation before you must have felt. The quiet illusion that maybe, just maybe, everything will be all right by morning. By now, you've seen how humanity went from licking sticky fruit to worshipping beer goddesses. But none of that stays put for long. Especially once humans start wandering. You're stepping onto a creaking deck now, waves slapping wood, the air thick with salt, sweat, and the faint tang of fermenting barrels below. Welcome to the age when alcohol learned to travel. Trade, conquest, and curiosity turn your cup into a passport. Somewhere around 1500 BCE, You're sailing with Phoenician merchants, masters of the Mediterranean, hauling amphorae full of sweet wine. Every port, every island, every parched traveler offers a toast in a slightly different accent. The stuff leaks, it spoils, it sloshes, but it connects cultures like invisible threads, soaked in grape juice. A jar cracked on a dock in Tyre could influence a drinking ritual in Sicily months later. You learn quickly that wherever humans go, they try to bring their buzz with them. Archaeologists found traces of beer-like residue in an Egyptian shipwreck from the 14th century BCE. Historians still argue whether that means full-fledged exports or just sailors bringing their comfort brews for the voyage. Either way, the ship's hold becomes humanity's first floating pub. Picture the sailors, barefoot, sunburnt, constantly thirsty. They discover that water goes foul fast, but a little beer stays safe longer. You sip warm, foamy ale and realize this is an early life hack. Alcohol wasn't just fun. It was practical. You can imagine one grizzled seafarer muttering, "If it kills the germs, it can't kill me." You hope he's right. Then there's mid. Sweet, golden, portable. Vikings would later haul barrels of it across icy seas, believing it fueled courage and poetry alike. You, meanwhile, stand at the edge of a Nordic fjord, watching a line of ships set out, each with a few barrels lashed tight below deck. Mead becomes a morale booster, a ritual, and an excuse for loud songs no one remembers by dawn. But the real revolution brews farther east. In China, around the 7th century BCE, rice wine becomes a trade and tribute tool. You imagine a caravan trudging through dust and wind, clay jars clinking softly like a caravan's heartbeat. When one breaks, the scent of rice and yeast drifts over the Silk Road. You can almost hear a future emperor's emissary asking, "Can you bring more of that next time?" A fast forward to the Indian Ocean. Arab merchants move date wine, palm toddy, and fermented camel milk along the coastlines. The heat makes preservation tricky, so innovation thrives. Spices, herbs, and resins are added not just for taste but for survival. Historians still argue whether this marks the birth of flavored liquors or just desperate improvisation. Either way, your tongue is on fire, and someone insists it's good for your digestion. The ancient Greeks perfect the art of dilution. Wine mixed with water, sometimes sea water, because why not? In a symposium, you recline on cushions, sipping from a kylix as philosophers debate virtue and hangovers in equal measure. One claims diluted wine keeps the mind sharp. Another slurs, "Not if you keep proving your point that way." You stifle a laugh. Meanwhile, Roman legions carry their wine across Europe like holy water. Every camp sets up a mini vineyard. Every soldier receives a ration. The empire becomes an organism fueled by fermented grapes. And when they encounter the Celtic tribes of Gaul, they swap amphorae for wooden barrels. A technology that changes everything. Barrels are lighter, sturdier, and ideal for long journeys. You feel the slosh of history moving faster. Soon, trade winds connect continents. From the Mediterranean to Africa, from the Middle East to India, alcohol becomes as universal as fire. It's not just something you drink. It's a social currency, a bribe, a peace offering, a declaration of trust. You watch two traders, one Persian, one Nubian, clink cups before exchanging ivory and silk. Neither understands the other's words, but both know the language of a shared buzz. By the medieval period, trade routes hum with liquid ambition. Venetian merchants ferry fine wines to northern Europe, where cooler climates demand stronger brews. Beer thickens, wine sweetens, and honey flows into everything. You're standing in a port town, surrounded by the smell of tar, oranges, and yeast. Someone calls out in 3 languages, "Best barrels from Genoa." Yet behind the romance lies risk. Spoilage, theft, intoxicated navigation. Each voyage courts disaster. A drunk helmsman might turn a whole expedition into a soggy legend. There's even a medieval maritime law: no drinking before steering. naturally. It's ignored before noon. You glance at a sailor wobbling near the rudder, and the captain just sighs. At least he's singing this time. Then comes sugar. Sweetness changes everything. It masks the roughness of cheap wine, revives tired beer, and later, when combined with distillation, births rum. The drink that will reshape oceans. But that's for another section. For now, you stand on a dock at sunset, a wooden cup in hand, watching casks roll into ships like faithful companions. Each wave carries more than goods. It ferries habits, cravings, songs, and hangovers. You start realizing that getting drunk wasn't just about escaping the day. It was about belonging, about carrying a tiny, bubbling piece of home wherever you went. Even now, the smell of salt and all might tug at some ancient memory of movement and discovery. And just as you think humanity might tire of spreading its vices, someone in a distant port raises a toast and invents a new one. From Babylon to Bali, from Alexandria to Alexandria's imitators, the rhythm remains the same: meet, trade, drink, repeat. You sip again. The sea is calm tonight. But you know what's coming. Something purer, stronger, clearer. Distillation is on the horizon, and the world's about to get much, much drunker. The sea winds fade behind you, and the air thickens with the scent of copper, smoke, and something suspiciously sweet. You're not on a ship anymore. You're in a dim workshop, a flickering oil lamp reflecting in a glass coil. Here, humankind's relationship with alcohol takes a leap from pleasantly fizzy to scientifically potent. This is where distillation quietly changes everything. You probably don't realize it yet, but that bubbling flask in front of you is the reason shots exist, the reason sailors will someday sing about rum, and the reason a few monks will accidentally create something strong enough to double as both medicine and flammable hazard. The earliest known stills come from ancient Mesopotamia and Egypt, not for drinking, but for perfumes. Someone wanted the essence of roses, not the spirit of barley. But as you watch vapor swirl inside glass tubing, you can almost hear the future whisper. What if we drink it? Historians still argue whether that moment of curiosity happened in the Middle East, India, or China first. The Arabs were distilling essential oils by the 9th century. The Chinese were experimenting with fermented grain spirits earlier. But the step from alchemy to happy hour happens gradually. Like every bad idea, humans can't resist testing. Imagine standing beside a 10th century alchemist in Baghdad, robe singed, hands stained with copper oxide. He's muttering prayers to balance the elements. And you're thinking, maybe I shouldn't stand too close. The air smells like warm fruit and faint metal. A drop condenses on the end of the spout. Clear, shimmering, almost innocent looking. He collects it in a clay cup, raises it to the light, and takes a cautious sip. His eyes widen. By the heavens, he says. That's strong. Word spreads faster than the fumes. The process, called alcohol, will later lend its name to alcohol. The irony is perfect. What began as the pursuit of pure essence becomes the world's most popular impurity. You take a sip and cough. It burns, sharp as lightning, but behind it lies the cleanest buzz you've ever felt. No spoiled wine, no murky ale, just distilled fire. Fast forward a few centuries. Monks in medieval Europe are hunched over copper stills, brewing what they call aqua vita, the water of life. You'd think something with that name would heal you, not make you dance on tables, but to them it's medicine. They use it to preserve herbs, sterilize wounds, and treat melancholy. You, lying on a monastery cot, are starting to feel more spiritually elevated than healed. Drink, a kindly monk says, pouring you a shot of clear liquid. It'll cure what ails you. You believe him for the first 3 sips. Then you start seeing halos on people who definitely don't deserve them. Soon, distillation spreads beyond monasteries. Apothecaries, scholars, and desperate peasants all get in on the act. Italians refine grape spirits into grappa. The Irish and Scots turn barley into whiskey. The Russians discover that fermented grain mixed with frost and boredom equals vodka. By the 14th century, Europe is awash in liquors of every hue and proof. One quirky tidbit. The earliest brandy wasn't meant for drinking. It was a way to ship wine without it spoiling. Traders thought they'd dilute it later with water. They never did. Someone tasted it mid-voyage and said, "Actually, let's just keep it this way." You nod. That's how every innovation happens. A little laziness, a lot of curiosity, and one tipsy genius. Now, think of the social impact. Before distillation, getting drunk required quantity. You had to down mugs of beer or bowls of wine. But with spirits, one small glass does the work of 5. Economies shift. Taverns shrink but profits soar. Soldiers carry flasks instead of barrels. Alcohol becomes not just culture, it becomes infrastructure. Armies are funded by it, taxes collected on it, empires fueled by its trade. And it's not just Europe. In Asia, rice distillation gives rise to soju and sake's stronger cousins. In the Caribbean, distilling fermented sugarcane juice births aguardiente. Even remote mountain villages experiment with fruit mash and rudimentary stills. You could walk the world in the 1500s and never find a sober border. You trail behind a 16th century merchant in Spain. He pours you something amber-colored. Brandy, he says proudly. It smells like caramelized heaven. We call it burnt wine. You take a sip. It's liquid gold, warm enough to make you forget you're supposed to be polite. He tells you it's medicine too, for courage and conversation. You believe him. By now, alcohol's no longer just a drink. It's an identity. Irish monks call their whiskey Yissis Beatha, the water of life. Russians toast with vodka before every major decision. The Chinese incorporate distilled spirits into ancestor rituals. The line between divine and drunk has never been thinner. Yet, for all its wonders, distillation also brings shadows. Stronger booze means faster addiction, deeper poverty, louder arguments. You walk through a Renaissance alleyway and see both sides. Scholars debating chemistry, while beggars sell rough spirits that could strip paint. Historians still argue whether this surge of accessibility democratized joy or industrialized misery. Probably both. And then there's the taxman. Governments realize that alcohol is the perfect revenue stream. Easy to produce, impossible to hide, and, let's be honest, addictively profitable. The first excise taxes appear, followed quickly by smuggling, bribery, and some very drunk bureaucrats. You picture one king slamming his goblet down and declaring, "If my people must drink, at least let me profit from it." Classic leadership. By the 17th century, distilled spirits fuel entire economies. Rum, gin, and brandy dominate trade. Sailors are paid in alcohol, explorers carry it as currency. Ships leave Europe stocked with barrels of firewater and return with sugar, spices, and sometimes regret. You find yourself in London's gin craze of the 1700s. The streets reek of cheap spirits and despair. Signs advertise, drunk for a penny, dead drunk for 2. You watch women rock babies while sipping gin through cracked teacups. Moralists call it ruin. Poets call it life. You just call it Tuesday. One fringe theory says humans' fascination with distilled alcohol stems from our biology. Our livers evolved to process ethanol long before civilization. Maybe we're genetically inclined to chase that warm dizziness. Maybe getting drunk feels ancient because it is ancient. Whatever the reason, distillation cements alcohol's hold on the world. It's science, commerce, pleasure, and punishment distilled into one shimmering droplet. As the section winds down, picture yourself standing again by that first alchemist still. The copper glows faintly. Steam hisses. The air hums with quiet potential. You realize this tiny invention changed everything that came after. Trade, medicine, politics, even love stories. You raise the cup, salute the unseen hands that crafted it, and take another sip of the water of life. It burns, but in that burn is history, invention, and a little chaos. Humanity will never stop chasing that feeling. You blink, and the hiss of distillation fades into the hum of voices. Low rhythmic, and soaked in laughter. The air smells of roasted meat, wet straw, and a dozen different ales blending into one communal perfume. You push open a creaky wooden door and step into a medieval tavern. The light is gold and smoky. Welcome to the world's first truly social drinking culture. Medieval Europe, where alcohol isn't just a beverage, it's glue for civilization. The floorboards groan under your boots as you find a seat near the fire. Someone slides you a mug without asking. It's lukewarm, frothy, and suspiciously thick. Half beer, half porridge. How's ale? The barkeep grunts, wiping his hands on a rag that might have seen better centuries. You take a sip. It's sour, sweet, and oddly comforting. Like someone brewed liquid bread and forgot to apologize. Historians still argue whether taverns were truly democratic spaces or just the illusion of them. Either way, you're sitting next to a farmer, a friar, and a fishmonger, all arguing about taxes while a lute twangs in the corner. One quips, "The king's coin tastes better after 2 pints." The others laugh, and you realize this moment, is how early political ideas ferment, over shared mugs and mild buzzes. In the medieval city, taverns are everywhere. They're part hotel, part gossip pit, part therapy session. Alewives, women brewers, dominate the trade at first, crafting small batches in homes and serving them in front-room pubs. Their signs, often marked by broomsticks over doors, inspire whispers of witchcraft centuries later. You imagine one stirring her cauldron of barley mash, muttering, "Witch? No dear, I'm just fermenting dinner." By day, beer keeps workers hydrated, because, and here's a mainstream fact, water is often unsafe to drink. Fermentation kills pathogens. A child's breakfast might include small beer, a weak, cloudy brew with barely any alcohol. It's not about getting drunk. It's about staying alive. Yet, come evening, stronger batches flow freely, and the tavern fills with the thud of mugs and the rise of stories taller than cathedral spires. The sounds layer like music, laughter, clinking, the occasional thump of a bar fight that ends in friendship. You can smell roasted onions and spilled oil, feel the stick of the table under your palms. There's no menu, just whatever was cooked or caught that day. The candles gutter, the crowd leans closer, and someone begins to sing. You don't know the words, but the melody pulls you in. Outside, medieval life is short and brutal. Plagues, famine, war. But in here, time softens. You sip, and everything slows. The oil doesn't just loosen tongues, it oils the gears of human connection. For a few coins, a peasant becomes a poet, a knight becomes a fool, and everyone, for a while, forgets the cold. Then, inevitably, the church steps in. Too much joy draws suspicion. Sermons warn of gluttony and sin. Monks brew beer within abbeys, promising piety, but quietly refining flavor. You picture rows of tonsured men, sipping foamy ale, for health, and can't help but grin. If hypocrisy had a smell, it would be hops and incense. Meanwhile, guilds rise. Professional drinkers, in a sense. Brewers, vintners, coopers, all regulated, taxed, inspected. Drinking becomes infrastructure again. Cities compete over recipes. In Flanders, beer becomes as prized as silk. In England, alehouses multiply faster than cats in a barn. One quirky fact. Medieval taverns often doubled as post offices and courthouses. You could get your mail, sue your neighbor, and get tipsy in one convenient stop. Efficiency at its finest. By the 14th century, public drinking is a civic art. Inns line the roads, serving travelers everything from spiced wine to mead thick enough to chew. You step into one after a long, muddy ride. The innkeeper hands you a cup of hypocras. Wine spiked with cinnamon, ginger, and sugar. It tastes like a medieval attempt at mulled wine, and cough syrup's weird cousin. Still, it warms your bones. Outside, frost paints the windows, but the conversation never freezes. Merchants brag about profits. Soldiers toast fallen comrades. Poets chase muses through tankards. Every class, every creed, every dialect finds common ground in the act of raising a cup. Alcohol becomes Europe's unofficial language of solidarity. You look around and spot a small sign etched into the wall. In vino veritas. In wine truth. You wonder if the patrons ever realize how literal that becomes after the third round. The tavern isn't just a social hub. It's a political theater. Revolutions start in rooms like this. The seeds of rebellion sprout between gulps of ale and muttered complaints. You overhear one grizzled man whispering about unjust taxes. Another nods, fists clenched. You can almost see the future pamphlets, protests, revolts, all foaming up from tavern chatter. But it's not all idealism. Sometimes it's chaos. Medieval London alone sees countless drunken brawls and fires sparked by overturned torches. One chronicler writes that taverns were the devil's antechambers. Another admits he wrote that inside a tavern. Historians still argue whether he was ironic or just plastered. As the centuries roll, the tavern evolves. By the Renaissance, there are architectural jewels, timbered walls, stained glass, carved oak counters. They become tourist attractions before tourism exists. And yet, the essence stays the same: a place to drop your armor, literal or emotional, and feel human. You lean back, the mug half empty, and listen to the laughter bouncing off the beams. There's something timeless here, something that threads through every culture. The need to gather, to share warmth, to loosen the edges of loneliness. Your eyelids droop. Maybe it's the hour, maybe the hour. You catch a final joke from the next table. "I only drink to forget my problems." "Funny," replies another. "I drink to remember what they were." Everyone roars. You smile. Humanity has always known how to laugh at its own mess. When you finally step back into the cold, the night smells of wood smoke and rain. The tavern door swings shut, muffling the song but not the feeling. You carry it with you, a sense that in every age, somewhere, people are still clinking cups, still seeking warmth against the dark. And just ahead, that warmth will blaze even brighter. Because soon sugar and empire will collide, and rum, sweet, dark, and dangerous, will change the world again. The tavern's glow fades behind you, replaced by the glare of a blinding tropical sun. The air tastes like salt and molasses, and you're standing on a wooden dock stacked with barrels marked sugar. You hear seagulls, chains, and something darker. The creak of a world tilting toward greed. Welcome to the age of colonialism, sugar and rum. The drink that will fuel empires, revolutions, and more hangovers than history can count. You squint toward a horizon lined with sails. Spanish galleons, English brigs, Dutch merchant ships, all shimmering like silver teeth. Each one carries the same secret cargo, a recipe for profit. The New World's sugar plantations have found their sweetener, and in the process, the world has found its next addiction. Sugar isn't just food, it's fuel. And where sugar ferments, rum is born. You wander through a Caribbean plantation, the air thick with crushed cane and steam. Workers, many enslaved, most unfree, feed green stalks into wooden rollers. Juice gushes out, sticky and golden, collecting in vats the size of small rooms. It smells like candy and decay. At night, the leftover molasses begins to bubble. Fermentation, nature's quiet rebellion, turns sweetness into spirit. Someone dips a gourd, tastes the brew, and coughs fire. "Not bad," he mutters. "Not good either." A week later, someone distills it, and suddenly, it's more than drinkable. It's profitable. Historians still argue whether rum began as a happy accident or a calculated scheme. But what's certain is this: once it existed, nobody stopped. Rum becomes the bloodline of empire. Ships carry it across the Atlantic, trading it for enslaved people, who are forced to harvest more sugar to make more rum. The triangle trade spins Europe, Africa, the Americas, all tied together by one burning liquid. You're watching the birth of globalization, and it smells like caramel and cruelty. Back in Europe, rum tastes exotic, tropical, sinful. The rich sip it, the poor gulp it. In Britain, sailors get daily rations. The tot, to steady nerves and drown monotony. You stand on a ship's deck, mug in hand, as waves crash and the quartermaster ladles out grog, rum mixed with lime juice and water. Keeps the scurvy away, he claims. You drink and realize, miracle or myth, it works. A few centuries later, the British Navy will carry that tradition into the 20th century. Every day, a small glass of rum per sailor. Discipline and debauchery, all in one neat serving. But it's not just the British. The French distill rum agricole from fresh sugarcane juice, the Spanish from molasses. In Brazil, cachara becomes the spirit of both plantation and rebellion. You find yourself on a veranda in Bahia, watching locals mix it with lime and sugar, a caipirinha, the perfect rebellion in a glass. Yet beneath the clinking glasses and tropical breezes lies a brutal truth. Millions of enslaved Africans are the unseen hands behind every sip. You walk through a field under a merciless sun. The rhythm of machetes cutting cane echoes like a heartbeat. The overseer's whip cracks. It's a sound that never fades from the rum's history. You can't unhear it. You shouldn't. And yet, paradoxically, rum also becomes the language of resistance. In the Caribbean, enslaved people secretly distill their own batches, passing recipes like coded defiance. A sip shared after sunset becomes a symbol of endurance, of spirit that can't be broken. One fringe tidbit during revolts. Rebels sometimes used rum, soaked cloths as makeshift torches. A literal fire of freedom. Meanwhile, in colonial taverns, the same drink fuels revolution of another kind. Boston, 1765, the Sons of Liberty gather in a smoky room, mugs raised high. You can almost hear the arguments slurring into slogans.
No taxation without representation!
Someone spills a pent on a pamphlet. Maybe that's how the American Revolution begins, sticky, loud, and slightly drunk. Rum is everywhere. At the docks, in the barracks, in the brothels, on the battlefields. It's the lubricant of empire and the accelerant of rebellion. You sip, and history tingles on your tongue. By the 18th century, sugar wealth builds cities and breaks lives. London, Liverpool, Boston, all grow fat on Caribbean exports. Fancy dinner tables serve rum punch in porcelain bowls, while ships unload human cargo by the ton. The same drink that warms your chest also chills your conscience. You move through a London marketplace. Rum barrels roll across cobblestones. Molasses spills like tar. Vendors hawk plantation gold. And Jamaica fire. You overhear one lady say, "A touch of the islands."
How delightful!
You want to tell her the real cost, but history is too drunk to listen. Still, change brews slowly. Abolitionists rise. Artists, poets, and preachers start linking sugar to suffering. Pamphlets circulate. Your sweet tooth feeds slavery. The tide turns, inch by inch. When the British slave trade finally ends in 1807, rum doesn't vanish, but its shadow deepens. Every glass carries memory. In the Americas, rum morphs again. Lighter, cleaner, mass-produced. Sailors, smugglers, and revolutionaries all keep it close. In Haiti, independence is toasted with rum distilled by freed hands. You raise your cup alongside them, feeling something shift. A new chapter in the drink's long story. Historians still argue what rum symbolizes. Freedom or exploitation. Luxury or loss. Maybe it's both. Like all human creations, it mirrors us, capable of joy and cruelty in equal measure. By the 19th century, other spirits begin to challenge rum's dominance. Whiskey in America, brandy in France. But none carry the same mix of sun and sorrow. Rum remains the drink of sailors, dreamers, and ghosts. Night falls on the island now. You sit on the beach, the air buzzing with insects and distant drums. Someone hands you a cup filled with dark rum and coconut water. You take a sip, and the flavors blur time. Sweet, smoky, bitter alive. The waves crash softly, like a slow applause for survival. The stars above shimmer, like old distillers' fires. You realize humanity never drinks just for pleasure. It drinks to remember, to forget, to feel connected, however briefly, to something bigger than itself. Tomorrow, new empires will rise. New vices will follow. And soon, alcohol will face its first true moral reckoning. But for now, the night is warm. The cup is full, and the story keeps flowing. Thicker than sugar, deeper than rum. The sound of waves fades, replaced by the hum of factories and the steady tick of clocks. Smoke drifts through grey skies, and cobblestone streets gleam with rain. You're walking through the 19th century now, an age of steam, science, and social conscience. The tavern songs are quieter, the laughter more restrained. For the first time in history, the world starts to question whether it's had one drink too many. You pass rows of workers spilling out of mills at dusk, faces pale beneath soot and strain. Their hands are rough, their pay small, and their relief predictable. Gin shops glow at every corner, cheap, dimly lit sanctuaries where exhaustion meets escape. A sign outside promises warmth for a penny, forgetfulness for two. You step inside, and the smell of juniper and despair hits you like a wall. Historians still argue whether the industrial age made people drink more, or just made them easier to count. But one thing's clear. Alcohol has shifted from ritual to routine. No longer tied to harvests or holy days, it's become a daily anesthetic for factory life. You sip a glass of gin and understand why. Cold wages need warm comfort. Still, a countercurrent stirs. The same modernity that builds breweries also breeds reformers. Doctors start measuring the toll. Broken families, disease, accidents. Priests thunder about moral decay. You hear the word temperance whispered first, then shouted from pulpits. Picture a crowded church hall, circa 1820. A preacher slams his hand on a Bible and roars,
Drink is the devil's alley.
The audience murmurs, then applauds. You notice a woman in the back, her bonnet trembling as she nods. She's not thinking of theology. She's thinking of her husband, passed out on their doorstep again. Thus begins the temperance movement, a global crusade to save souls, homes, and economies by drying the world out, one pledge at a time. In the US, they form societies with grand names: the American Temperance Union, the Women's Christian Temperance Union. Members sign oaths promising total abstinence. They even wear pins, shaped like water drops, the first sober fashion statement in history. And they're not alone. Across the Atlantic, Britain's teetotalers march through Manchester with banners reading, "Water is best." You half expect someone to spike their tea out of spite. But the mood is earnest. Pamphlets flood the streets, showing drunk husbands, starving children, and broken furniture. The message is simple and effective: alcohol equals chaos. Yet even as reformers rage, science quietly complicates things. Chemists identify alcohol's effects on the brain. Physicians prescribe it in moderation for nerves and appetite. The contradiction deepens sin or symptom, poison or cure. Historians still argue whether early medicine helped curb addiction or just gave it better excuses. Meanwhile, the pub refuses to die. You duck into one on a rainy Manchester night, and it's packed. Steam fogs the windows, the air hums with laughter and pipe smoke. Workers toast survival, not success. One man jokes, "They can take my wages but not my whiskey." His friend replies, "They already took both." You laugh, even though it's not funny. A quirky tidbit from this era: some reformers open temperance bars, where patrons drink herbal tonics and moral clarity. You visit one. It's bright, polite, and painfully sober. The drink is made of dandelion and sassafras. It tastes like punishment. You leave quickly. By the mid-19th century, industrial progress gives the world its first mass-produced beer. bottled and branded. Names like Guinness Bus and Pilsner Urquell appear on glossy posters, selling not just a drink but an identity. Marketing becomes a new kind of intoxication. Clever, colorful, persuasive. You realize the game has changed. Alcohol no longer just numbs pain, it sells dreams. Across the ocean, America hums with contradictions. Whiskey distilleries flourish even as preachers condemn them. Irish immigrants bring beer halls. German brewers introduce lagers. Politicians toast at one table and legislate at another. It's a nation both drunk and ashamed of it. And then something remarkable happens. Women take the lead. Figures like Carrie Nation storm saloons with hatchets, smashing bottles and shouting scripture. You watch in disbelief as glass shatters and men scatter. That's one way to close the tab, you mutter. Carrie becomes both hero and punchline. But her fury captures a deeper truth. For many families, alcohol is more than indulgence, it's devastation. The temperance movement, fueled by mothers and widows, isn't about control, it's about survival. By the late 1800s, scientists join the moralists. Medical journals warn of cirrhosis and dependence. The word alcoholism enters vocabulary, replacing drunkenness. It's no longer just sin, it's sickness. A small but significant shift blame begins to move from soul to body. You can feel the world's understanding of intoxication changing, slowly, unevenly, but irreversibly. Still, hypocrisy lingers. Politicians preach sobriety by day and drink champagne by night. Brewers fund charities while flooding neighborhoods with cheap ale. You see it everywhere. The push and pull between profit and principle. Humanity's love affair with alcohol is turning into a public scandal, but no one's ready to end it. You walk through a park at dusk, pamphlets fluttering around your boots. Somewhere nearby, a band plays a hymn about temperance. In another alley, laughter spills from a pub. The two sounds overlap, reform and rebellion in perfect harmony. The industrial world is sober by daylight, drunk by moonlight. Its heart beats to a contradictory rhythm: progress and indulgence, guilt and celebration. And as you stroll through the fog, you sense what's coming next. The ultimate collision of morality, politics and booze. A century of laws, loopholes and moonshine. But for now, you pause beneath a flickering gaslight, watching a brewer's wagon rattle past. On its side, painted in bold letters, are two words that sum up the age. Poor spirit. You can't help but smile. Humanity never met a paradox it didn't try to bottle. The air grows colder, the crowds thinner. Somewhere, far across the ocean, lawmakers sharpen their pens and moral crusaders prepare their banners. The world's about to attempt something unthinkable, telling everyone to stop drinking altogether. You take one last sip of 19th century whiskey, savoring the irony. The temperance preachers were right about one thing: what comes next really will be history's greatest hangover. The year is 1920, and you can almost hear the cork pop on history's strangest toast. To no more drinking. You're standing in the shadow of America's grand experiment. Prohibition. Bars shutter overnight, barrels are smashed, and fountains of whiskey run into the gutters. 1,000 years of tipsy human tradition suddenly evaporates under the gaze of the law. You can almost smell the irony. It's oak-aged and poorly hidden. You wander through a silent street that once buzzed with tavern chatter. Signs read, "Silosid BYRDROF government." But the silence is deceptive. Behind back doors and beneath basements, the real party is only just beginning. You knock twice, pause, and then once more. The door creaks open. Inside, jazz hums softly, glasses clink, and the smell of gin, sharp, illegal, irresistible, fills the air. Welcome to the speakeasy. Historians still argue whether Prohibition was born from moral conviction or political ambition. The truth, as always, lies in the mix. Temperance movements had stirred for decades, but wartime patriotism sealed the deal. Brewers with German names became easy targets, and alcohol was blamed for inefficiency, crime, and broken homes. Congress signed the 18th Amendment, and America sobered up, at least on paper. You sip a bathtub gin. A brew so harsh it feels like drinking chemistry homework. People made alcohol out of anything they could ferment: fruit juice, potatoes, even industrial alcohol with flavoring. The results ranged from mildly awful to downright lethal. One quirky tidbit: federal agents added poison to industrial alcohol to deter bootleggers. It didn't work. People just filtered it with bread and hoped for the best. Yet, somehow, Prohibition didn't cleanse the nation, it dirtied it. Crime surged. The black market bloomed like mold on wet wood. Gangsters, names like Capone, Luciano, and Lansky, rose to power not with guns at first, but with liquor shipments. You can almost see them: sharp suits, quick smiles, eyes like wolves. You might even raise your glass to them, not out of respect, but disbelief that so much order created so much chaos. In Chicago, you follow a truck down a dark alley. Barrels are rolled into a hidden cellar under a bakery. Upstairs, customers buy rye bread. That's definitely more rye than bread. The cops know. Everyone knows. But money buys blindness, and justice smells faintly of bourbon. Meanwhile, Hollywood catches on. The silver screen glamorizes rebellion. You watch a newsreel. Dancers flapper their skirts, jazz trumpets shout, champagne flows in secret. Prohibition turns sin into style. If you can't drink legally, you think you might as well drink beautifully. Even politicians play along. Presidents sip near beer, and senators attend private dinners where the punch packs a punch. Hypocrisy becomes national flavor. Historians still argue whether Prohibition was doomed from the start, or simply human nature finding loopholes faster than laws. Across the Atlantic, Europe watches with a smirk. London pubs stay open, Paris cafes overflow, and in Germany, beer flows like democracy. But the ripples reach farther. In colonial Africa and India, European powers use alcohol taxes to control populations, while missionaries push abstinence as a path to civilization. The irony isn't lost on you. The same nations that toast empire abroad are banning cocktails at home. As the 1920s roar on, so does the rebellion. You find yourself in a smoky Harlem bar, music thundering through your chest. Jazz legend Louis Armstrong winks at the crowd while a dancer twirls in sequins. Everyone's drinking from teacups, the universal disguise of the age. For a brief moment, you realize Prohibition didn't stop the party. It just moved it underground and turned it into art. But not everyone's laughing. Hospitals fill with victims of toxic liquor. Families still break apart. And the government, once so proud of its moral high ground, quietly counts the cost. Enforcement is impossible. Corruption is rampant. One agent confides in you, voice low. It's like trying to stop a river with a net. By 1933, the country has had enough. The Great Depression hits, and suddenly, taxing alcohol doesn't seem sinful. It seems sensible. You stand in a crowded street on December 5th, the day the 21st Amendment repeals Prohibition. Bottles clink like church bells. Strangers hug, laugh, cry. Someone pops open champagne and shouts, "We're legal again!" The irony is sweet. After 13 years of national dryness, the world's biggest hangover ends not with regret, but with relief. Breweries reopen overnight. Bartenders reappear like magicians, shaking cocktails with the joy of resurrection. You order a glass of beer, the first legal sip in over a decade, and it tastes like victory and bad decisions. A quirky leftover from the Prohibition era, the mocktail. Invented to mimic cocktails without alcohol, it accidentally started a new tradition. Drinks like the Shirley Temple owe their birth to the dry years. Proof that even in constraint, creativity ferments. Yet even as the taps reopen, the scars remain. The temperance dream collapses, but its spirit lingers. Drinking campaigns evolve into public health warnings. The conversation shifts. Not drink or don't drink, but how much is too much? It's less moral now, more medical. Alcoholism becomes a recognized disease. Recovery groups form. The bottle, once purely symbolic, becomes psychological. You stroll through a 1930s street, neon lights flickering over bars advertising cold beer, honest prices. The depression grinds on, but the bar offers warmth, community, escape. You can see it in the faces around you, men and women laughing despite everything. Humanity, once again, finds its balance at the bottom of a glass. Still, debates rage on. Doctors publish studies linking alcohol to heart disease and liver damage. Others claim moderate wine aids digestion and mood. Historians still argue whether Prohibition made people healthier or merely more inventive. You suspect both. Humans don't quit habits, they rebrand them. As you leave the bar, the radio hums a soft jazz tune. The world has changed. Faster cars, louder cities, brighter lights. But the same old ritual endures. Stress sip, repeat. You exhale, watching your breath fog against the cold night. Civilization tried to outlaw intoxication, and all it learned was that the urge runs deeper than law, deeper than faith. Maybe as deep as the need to dream. And the story isn't over. Beyond the cities, across oceans, another kind of drink is rising. Cleaner, stronger, mass-produced. Liquor becomes not just culture, but industry. The world is about to go global, and so is its thirst. You step out into the night, past the flicker of neon signs, into a world that's drunk on freedom, and maybe a little tipsy on itself. You blink, and the world shifts again. The 1930s fade into smoke and sirens, and suddenly you're standing in the middle of the 20th century. An era of world wars, jars, jukeboxes, and jet planes. The bottles didn't stay empty for long. In fact, they multiplied. Humanity, it seems, took Prohibition as a challenge. You're in a dimly lit canteen somewhere in Europe, 1943. Soldiers crowd around wooden tables, their laughter mixing with the drone of bombers in the distance. Tin cups clink. Someone strums a guitar out of tune. You take a sip of army, issue rum and wince. It burns, but it's comforting. The taste of courage in liquid form. Historians still argue whether alcohol kept soldiers sane or simply dulled the horror. Maybe both. British troops get daily rations of rum. Americans prefer beer. Russians, of course, swear by vodka. Every army has its spirit, literally. The quirky fact: the British Navy only officially ended its rum ration in 1970, a full 25 years after World War II ended. Black Tot Day, they called it, and sailors mourned like they'd lost a friend. As the war ends, the party returns with a vengeance. You walk through a Paris cafe in 1946. Laughter, music, and a flood of wine bottles rolling out like trophies of survival. People drink not to forget now, but to remember that they made it through. Champagne becomes a symbol again, but this time, it's not aristocracy, it's resilience. Across the Atlantic, America glows with neon. The 1950s hum with confidence and cocktails. You can hear ice clinking in highball glasses at suburban dinner parties. Martinis sparkle beside cigarette smoke. The cocktail hour becomes the new confession booth. You might even picture a man in a grey suit. Slick hair, tired smile, pouring another glass while pretending life is under control. Historians still argue whether the 1950s were truly happy or just, well, decorated. You think, sipping something that tastes like optimism and gin. Alcohol becomes glamour again. Hollywood leads the charge. Frank Sinatra croons about whiskey, Marilyn Monroe swirls her martini, and James Bond turns, shaken, not stirred, into a cultural commandment. Drinking isn't rebellion anymore. It's sophistication. You're not escaping the world, you're accessorizing it. Yet behind the sparkle, the hangover grows. You notice the quiet desperation at the edges of suburbia. Housewives sneaking, afternoon tonics. Men coming home. Just one drink. Over the line. Alcohol, that old friend, slips back into its trickster role. Comforter and destroyer, invisible but everywhere. Meanwhile, science joins the conversation again. Researchers study addiction, brain chemistry, and behavior. The first Alcoholics Anonymous meeting had already started back in 1935, and by the 1950s, AA spreads like quiet hope across the world. The tone changes. It's no longer about morality or rebellion. It's about recovery, about facing yourself in the mirror without the glass between you. Still, you can't ignore the global shift. Post-war prosperity means global brands. Whiskey from Scotland, beer from Germany, sake from Japan, rum from the Caribbean. The world is now a bar with no closing hours. And then comes television. Ads pour into living rooms like little sips of suggestion. Drink this, and you'll be popular. Pour this, and you'll be powerful. You can almost hear the voiceover. It's not just a drink. It's an experience. But the world, as always, has a hangover waiting. The 1960s erupt with rebellion, not against alcohol this time, but against everything else. The young trade gin for LSD, whiskey for weed. You wander through Woodstock, where bottles and joints pass hand to hand beneath a sky of electric guitars. The counterculture doesn't hate alcohol, but it's no longer the chosen escape. Still, it lingers, in the background, like an old song people hum without noticing. You catch a glimpse of the corporate boardrooms that followed. By the 1970s, alcohol is both ritual and risk. Executives drink through lunch, deals are sealed over scotch, and every celebration ends in a toast. But now, warning labels creep in, like whispers at the end of a party. Excessive drinking may be harmful. You wonder if anyone ever reads them before the second round. One quirky fact: the mocktail craze of the late 1970s wasn't about health. It started in Los Angeles as a trend for drivers stuck with DUI laws. The first, Virgin, drinks weren't symbols of purity. They were loopholes for license preservation. Still, you can't help but feel the irony. Humanity built faster cars and better highways, then got drunk and crashed on both. By the 1980s, governments across the world are passing stricter laws. Minimum drinking ages, seatbelt enforcement, breathalyzers. Society finally admits what it's known for centuries: humans are terrible at moderation. Historians still argue whether this age marked a decline in drinking or just better guilt management. But for every study showing the dangers, there's another praising: a glass of red wine for the heart. The conversation swings back and forth, like a pendulum dipped in Merlot. You wander through a smoky bar in 1985. The music is synth pop, the lighting neon blue. A bartender in rolled sleeves mixes a Long Island iced tea, and you realize it's 5 different spirits pretending to be soda. Humanity's honesty problem in a glass. There's a quiet awareness now. Addiction isn't just a personal failing, it's a public issue. Rehab centers rise, helplines expand, celebrities check in and check out. The cultural tone sobers slightly. People still drink, but they talk about it differently. Not, why not? But, when's enough? You walk outside into the night, the city buzzing under fluorescent lights. Alcohol isn't gone, not even diminished. It's evolved. Sleeker, smarter, more self-aware. The 20th century hasn't ended yet, but you can feel the rhythm changing. From roaring excess to quiet reflection, from rebellion to ritual. Humanity hasn't stopped drinking. It's just learned to pretend it's thinking about it first. And as the 1990s flicker on the horizon, you sense another transformation. A world more connected, more anxious, more caffeinated, and more confused than ever. The drinks are about to get global, digital, and designer. You exhale, watching the glow of 1,000 city lights shimmer across the glass in your hand. The 20th century is aging gracefully, but still can't quite say no to one last round. You step forward and the lights change again. Gone are the smoky bars and rotary phones. The hum of the 1990s rises around you, pulsing with neon beepers and dial-up tones. The world is louder, faster, more connected, and somehow thirstier than ever. Humanity hasn't stopped drinking. It's simply upgraded its glassware. You start in Tokyo, where neon signs flicker above alleys packed with izakayas, the Japanese equivalent of pubs, but tidier, humbler, more ritualized. Salarymen sit shoulder to shoulder, drinking beer after beer, as if the day hasn't ended, but merely dissolved into liquid over time. Laughter erupts. Someone slaps a coworker on the back. You sip a cold Asahi, and realize this is less rebellion and more release. A collective sigh of exhaustion disguised as celebration. Across the ocean, in New York City, the 1990s bar scene is slick and ironic. Cosmopolitans glint in martini glasses, made famous by Sex and the City. You overhear someone say, "It's not drinking, it's networking." Everyone laughs, but you can hear the truth in it. The drink has become both prop and persona, a symbol of who you think you are. Historians still argue whether globalization made cultures more similar or just their hangovers. Because now, thanks to trade, tourism, and television, everyone drinks like everyone else. Mexican tequila in London, Scotch whiskey in Seoul, Russian vodka in Los Angeles. The bar has gone global. Meanwhile, advertising reaches its peak intoxication. You can't escape it. Billboards, commercials, music videos, glossy magazines. Beer ads promise friendship, courage, and adventure. Liquor brands claim sophistication, rebellion, or mystery depending on the decade's mood. You take a sip of a drink sold as freedom in a bottle, and wonder what that says about captivity. A quirky tidbit in the early 1990s, one vodka brand actually marketed itself as the choice of creative nonconformists. Sales tripled. Humans, it seems, will buy anything that flatters their flaws. But even as marketing soars, the public grows uneasy. Health culture sneaks in. Gyms, yoga, juicing. The first whispers of detox. People still drink, but now they balance it with kale smoothies and guilt. "I only drink on weekends," becomes the new confessions. And Thursdays. Sometimes Wednesdays. You smirk. Progress, maybe, but not sobriety. By the early 2000s, nightlife becomes performance. You find yourself in a club in Berlin, lights strobing, music pounding like the heart of civilization itself. The drinks glow fluorescent, engineered more for Instagrams, which hasn't even been invented yet, than taste. You sip something called an electric blue Long Island, and immediately regret it. Historians still argue whether this counts as drinking or self-punishment. You mutter. The century turns. The Y2K bug doesn't destroy civilization, but energy drinks nearly do. Vodka Red Bull becomes the drink of choice for a generation that wants to party harder, longer, faster. It's caffeine and ethanol in chemical alliance. Part stimulant, part sedative, all chaos. Emergency rooms quietly brace themselves. Then the internet grows up, and suddenly, everyone's a critic. Online reviews tell you which craft beer is authentic, which whiskey is smooth, which wine pairs best with your existential crisis. A new wave emerges, the craft revolution. Small breweries, independent distillers, hipster bartenders with waxed mustaches and suspenders. You visit one of these new temples of taste. A man with tattoos and tweed earnestly describes your drink as having notes of caramel and regret. You nod solemnly. It's delicious. Quirk meets ritual again. The 2010s become the age of artisanal intoxication. Drinking is no longer about escape. It's about experience. You're not drunk. You're cultured. The irony isn't lost on you. Humanity has rebranded its vice as a hobby. But beneath the foam and flourish, something new stirs. Anxiety. The more connected the world becomes, the lonelier people seem. You scroll through social media, smiling faces, raised glasses, hashtags like Twawine Wednesday and FayTGIF. You can almost hear the exhaustion beneath the emojis. Everyone's celebrating survival, not joy. Meanwhile, Science keeps spoiling the party. Studies link alcohol to cancer, heart disease, and sleep problems. Others claim moderate drinking helps longevity. The debate cycles endlessly. Good, bad, good again. Historians still argue whether this scientific tug of war actually changed behavior or just gave everyone a new excuse. Around the same time, alcohol-free movements quietly rise. Dry January, sober October. Bars that serve mocktails, so complex they cost more than real cocktails. You walk into one, sleek lighting, minimalist menus, kombucha on tap. A woman next to you orders something called a mindful Negroni. You taste it, it's spicy, bitter, and suspiciously satisfying. You realize sobriety has gone premium. But not everywhere follows. In parts of Eastern Europe, drinking remains a daily dance with tradition. Vodka to honor guests, wine to bless weddings. Toasts so frequent, you wonder how anyone remembers what they're celebrating. In South America, rum and cachaça flow through festivals, blending Catholic saints with carnival sins. The ritual remains universal joy, connection, release. You find yourself in Moscow on a freezing night, clutching a shot of vodka that feels more like medicine than luxury. The man next to you says, "To health," and laughs. You toast back, realizing that despite centuries of warnings, humans still believe one drink can heal the soul. Back in the West, a strange duality takes root. Corporate offices stock kombucha in the fridge and whiskey in the drawers. Fitness influencers post gym, selfies at noon, and margaritas at midnight. It's balance, apparently, a word humans use when they can't say addiction. By the late 2010s, technology tightens its grip. Apps track your drinks, calculate your blood alcohol content, even scold you for overpouring. You get a notification. You've reached your weekly limit. You laugh, take another sip, and click dismiss. A quirky note from this digital decade. Scientists invent synthetic alcohol, molecules designed to mimic the buzz without the damage. It's still experimental, still controversial, but it hints at the next great frontier. Humanity's eternal quest to have the pleasure without the price. You stroll through a city at dusk, watching bars spill light onto the sidewalk. The world feels both ancient and brand new. The same rituals dressed in different glassware. You realize we've come full circle. From clay pots in ancient Mesopotamia to crystal tumblers under LED lights, the urge hasn't changed. Only the setting has. And yet a whisper hums beneath it all. Something quieter, gentler, almost hopeful. Younger generations drink less. They crave connection, clarity, control. They trade hangovers for mindfulness, cocktails for conversations. The culture that once worshipped the bottle now questions it. Tenderly, curiously, without shame. You smile as the night hums around you. Laughter. Clinking life. The human story of alcohol isn't one of failure, it's one of persistence. We keep trying to refine what can't be perfected. The art of taking the edge off existence without falling over it. And as the lights of the 21st century glow brighter, you sense the next twist coming. A world where technology, neuroscience, and nostalgia all compete to redefine what it means to be buzzed. You blink, and suddenly the 2020s arrive, not with a pop of champagne, but with the silence of lockdowns, empty bars, abandoned pubs, fridges stocked with sardo starters instead of beer. You stand in the middle of a city that's forgotten how to clink glasses. Streets once filled with laughter now echo only footsteps and distant sirens. Humanity's longest happy hour has been cancelled. At first, it feels like the end of an era. Distilleries halt production, bars shutter overnight, bartenders trade shakers for sanitizer. But humans are nothing if not resourceful. Within weeks, living rooms turn into cocktail labs. You scroll through social media. Endless clips of people shaking martinis on Zoom, toasting webcams, pretending not to drink alone. Hashtags bloom like digital vines. Fen quarantini. Fan lockdown lager. Fev virtual cheers. Historians still argue whether the pandemic made people drink more or made them notice how much they already did. For many, alcohol became both comfort and companion, a way to punctuate days that all blurred into one. You picture yourself at home, halfway through a glass of wine, realizing you can't remember if it's Wednesday or Saturday. But the moment feels strangely universal. The whole world, for once, is drinking to the same uncertainty. A quirky tidbit: several major distilleries shifted from whiskey to hand sanitizer production during 2020. Humanity, ever the improviser, found a way to keep spirits alive, literally. You step out onto a quiet balcony. The city lights shimmer in the distance. Somewhere, a neighbor clinks a glass against their railing. You raise yours back. A silent salute between two invisible strangers. As the world reopens, something shifts. Bars return, but they feel different. Softer, calmer. People sip slower. They savor, not escape. It's as if the collective hangover of history has finally caught up, and the new generation isn't sure it wants to keep drinking at the same pace. You wander through a trendy, low ABV bar in Copenhagen. The menu lists cocktails made with herbal infusions, fermented tea, and spirits that barely register above 3%. The bartender, calm and confident, says, "People want to feel, not forget." You take a sip, floral, crisp, oddly grounding. You get it? Across the world, mindfulness and sobriety movements rise. TikTokers post sober curiosity journeys. Influencers trade champagne selfies for mental health check-ins. The phrase, "No thanks, I'm not drinking tonight," loses its stigma and gains quiet respect. The pendulum has swung again, this time toward consciousness. But of course, the industry adapts. Alcohol companies, ever clever, launch zero-proof versions of their classics. Non-alcoholic gin whiskey, even wine flood the shelves. You taste one and blink. It's convincing. Humanity's craving hasn't changed, it's just refined. We don't want the chaos, just the ceremony. Still, the old rituals persist. In dive bars and weddings, on beaches and rooftops, people still toast. To love, to luck, to making it through another week. It's instinct now, part of the code. You can change the drink, but not the gesture, the glass lift, the eye contact, the moment of shared relief. That's eternal. Historians still argue whether alcohol is a cultural glue or a crutch. Maybe it's both. You look around every civilization, every crisis. Every celebration has poured something into a cup and called it connection. As technology races ahead, even the future of drinking goes digital. In the metaverse, you see avatars raising glowing mugs in virtual pubs. NFT wines sell for absurd prices. Influencers host livestream tastings for followers they'll never meet in person. You can't decide if it's progress or parody. The bar has no walls, and yet the loneliness remains. Meanwhile, in labs across Silicon Valley, scientists chase the holy grail's synthetic intoxication without harm. A molecule called alcarel promises the buzz without the damage. No hangovers, no liver strain, no regrets. It sounds like utopia, until you remember that humans always find a way to overdose utopia. A quirky experiment from this decade AI generated cocktail menus. You try one in Singapore, where a robot bartender serves you a drink named Neural Negroni 2.0. It tastes like citrus code and misplaced confidence. You smile anyway. Still, amid all the innovation, there's nostalgia. Craft brewers go back to ancient recipes, distillers resurrect forgotten methods. Somewhere in Georgia, the country, not the state, a vintner ferments wine in clay pots, just like their ancestors did 8,000 years ago. You take a sip, and for a second, time folds in on itself. From cave feasts to climate-controlled cellars, it's all the same impulse. To sip, to share, to slow the world down. You wander outside, where city lights blur into constellations. A couple passes by, laughing softly, sharing a single can of beer. A group of friends cheers over takeaway coffees that secretly aren't just coffee. and a lone man sits quietly, sipping water, smiling anyway. You realize, maybe the drink was never the point. Maybe it was always the pause. The pandemic reminded the world that life is fragile. The bottle, whether full or empty, is just a mirror of that fragility. A way to hold time for a moment, to say, we're still here. And so you stand beneath the modern skyline, glass in hand, pulse steady, and whisper a silent toast to the countless centuries behind you. Humans never stopped getting drunk. They just kept finding new meanings for it. Celebration, defiance, escape, communion. Every sip has been an echo of the same question: how do we make life a little easier to swallow? Tomorrow, scientists will invent something new. Laws will change, cultures will evolve. But somewhere, someone will still pour something amber or clear, lift it toward the fading light, and feel, for just a second, a little more human. You take your last sip of the century, and the taste is strangely familiar: warmth, memory, and the faint aftertaste of hope. You step into the future, a not so distant one, where alcohol still clings to humanity like an old perfume, lingering no matter how many times society tries to wash it off. Neon lights flicker over skyline bars that now double as sensory lounges. You don't order a drink anymore. You select an experience. The bartender, who looks half human and half hologram, asks softly, "Would you like the Tuscany sunrise or the Arctic silence tonight?" You pause, curious. When the cup touches your lips, it's cool and shimmering. The liquid tingles, not just your tongue, but your memories. You see flashes. Sumerian farmers dancing, Roman senators feasting, a 1920s jazz bar glowing with illegal champagne. The drink isn't intoxicating in the old sense. It's emotional. Synthetic neuro, spirits now let people sip nostalgia, a perfectly legal way to feel slightly drunk on history. Historians still argue whether this future is progress or regression. Some say humanity has finally outgrown its biological hangovers. Others whisper that replacing real intoxication with artificial emotions is just a cleaner addiction. Either way, you're still holding a glass. Humanity hasn't abandoned its ritual. It's just digitized it. You wander through the floating bar. Screens display global mood maps, tracking in real time what entire cities are drinking and feeling. Tokyo is serene. Berlin is wild. Sao Paulo, flirting. You can join any vibe with a swipe. It's intoxicating. Social connection as a subscription service. A quirky fact pops into your mind. The first alcohol ever consumed by AI wasn't liquid at all. It was data. In 2042, a group of researchers trained an AI model on centuries of flavor chemistry and asked it to design the perfect buzz. It responded with a digital waveform. Something that, when played through a neural headset, created the illusion of warmth and giddiness. They called it Bitters 2.0. You imagine ancient humans watching this scene, scratching their heads. They used honey and yeast. You use code and microcurrents. Yet the goal remains the same, to shift consciousness just enough to feel alive. You walk down a holographic street lined with dry bars. Once a niche, now the mainstream. Inside, people laugh over mocktails that glow faintly blue, flavored with adaptogens and memory enhancers. One wall displays the slogan "Drink less, feel more." You sip one. It's crisp, floral, laced with something that makes you remember your grandmother's kitchen. Though you can't quite recall why. The global alcohol industry, ever the chameleon, thrives again. They've rebranded not as liquor sellers, but as emotion engineers. Every bottle, every can, every packet of powder promises not a flavor, but a feeling. Confidence, comfort, nostalgia, courage. You visit a distillery in New Zealand, where the new spirit of the age isn't fermented but printed. Bioreactors grow molecular alcohol, customized for zero side effects. The founder tells you proudly, it's drunk without destruction. You smile politely, wondering if destruction was part of the point all along. Historians still debate when humans first drank for joy, not survival. Some point to Neolithic feasts, others to medieval festivals. You think the truth is simpler: humans drink because they're aware of time, because they know life ends, and they crave little moments that blur that knowledge. Whether in a clay cup or a glass of nanospirits, the intention is timeless. Outside, night stretches like velvet. Drones hum above, delivering beverages in recyclable pods. You grab one midair, cold to the touch. The label reads Archaic Bliss, Mesopotamian Mead, reconstructed. You laugh quietly. Of course someone coded the world's first hangover. You take a sip. The taste is sweet and ancient, notes of honey and history. A rush of warmth spreads through you. The world flickers, ziggurats rise, torches burn, and for a second, you're sitting among the first brewers again, watching them celebrate life's brevity with laughter and spilt drink. The scene fades back to the glowing skyline. A group of teenagers nearby is laughing over a round of sobriety games. Competitions to see who can stay mentally clear the longest. You grin. The irony isn't lost on you. After thousands of years, humans are still turning intoxication into a contest, just in reverse. Then comes the political wave. Governments, exhausted from centuries of regulating the unregulatable, finally unify global drinking laws. Public intoxication becomes obsolete when the public itself is virtual. You could be drunk in the metaverse and completely sober in the street. And so, the old moral wars fade. The line between indulgence and imagination disappears. A quirky new ritual emerges in this era: memory toasts. Instead of clinking glasses, people upload a cherished memory, a digital offering, to the cloud. Everyone in the group gets a small, shared buzz when they access it. It's oddly moving. You join one. Someone uploads their grandmother's kitchen. Another, a first kiss. You contribute the faint smell of rain on dusty soil. As the memories swirl together, your mind fills with warmth not born of alcohol, but of connection. Yet even now, the shadow of addiction lingers. Clinics treat dopamine displacement disorder, caused not by alcohol, but by synthetic mood loops. Humanity's genius is its curse: it keeps reinventing old vices with new ingredients. Historians still argue whether the end of real intoxication marked the end of rebellion. Without the risk, does pleasure lose its edge? Maybe. But as you watch people laugh freely, their neural bands glowing in rhythm, you sense that the spirit of Dionysus never died. It just upgraded. You pass a quiet corner, away from the holograms. There, a small bar glows dimly with real candlelight. The sign reads "Ye Old Fermentary." Inside, the air smells of hops, wood, and something raw. No devices, no neural bands. Just glass mugs, bubbling ale, and a bartender with wrinkles deep as tree bark. You sit. He slides a mug toward you, foam spilling slightly. "No synthetics here," he says. "Just the old ways." You take a cautious sip, and it burns. Real, flawed, intoxicating. For a moment, your body remembers what it means to be human: the warmth, the dizziness, the surrender. You laugh softly. Maybe humanity doesn't need to quit drinking. It just needs to remember why. Not to escape the world, but to taste it more fully. To clink glasses not for status, but for solidarity. To celebrate not perfection, but persistence. You finish your drink and stand. The neon skyline hums beyond the door. The bartender nods. "Don't forget us," he says. "History's better with a buzz." You step back into the night, slightly light-headed but fully present. The air smells of yeast, electricity, and a hint of rain. You smile. Maybe, in the end, that's all alcohol ever wanted to give. An excuse to pause between chaos and clarity, to raise a glass, and remember that being alive is the strangest intoxication of all. You find yourself walking along a quiet shoreline under a twilight sky. Not the dawn of civilization this time, but its long, drowsy after-party. The waves lap at your feet like the last drops of wine in a forgotten cup. The stars overhead seem to shimmer, just a little, as if tipsy themselves. You've traveled thousands of years through humanity's love affair with intoxication. From clay jars of honeyed mead to synthetic euphoria bottled in code. And now, at the edge of it all, you finally slow down. Somewhere behind you, cities pulse with light. Somewhere ahead, the sea hums softly, ancient and unjudging. You take a breath and realize something simple, but profound. The story of getting drunk was never just about alcohol. It was about yearning. For connection. For courage. For a way to quiet the noise inside. Historians still argue whether intoxication was the first art form or the first coping mechanism. Maybe it was both. When early humans fermented fruit by accident, they weren't just making alcohol. They were inventing escape. Every sip since has been an echo of that same human desire to step out of the ordinary for a moment and look at life through softer eyes. A quirky modern detail: archaeologists recently uncovered ancient drinking vessels in Armenia containing traces of opium, beer, and honey. An ancient cocktail older than civilization itself. Apparently, humans weren't content with one kind of high even then. You smile at the thought. Some things never change. Now, you wander through the ruins of an old vineyard, overgrown but still fragrant with ghostly sweetness. Vines crawl over broken barrels. A faded sign reads, "Wine is bottled time." You run your fingers across the letters and think about how true that is. Every bottle, every brew, every toast has carried a moment forward. A bridge between generations, between strangers, between versions of ourselves. The air cools as you move inland. You pass holographic advertisements for mindful microdrinking, retreats, then a stone carving of Dionysus half, buried in moss. He looks amused, like he's still watching humanity stumble and laugh through millennia of tipsy wisdom. Maybe that's the real trick. That the god of wine wasn't about chaos at all, but about reminding people that joy, too, is sacred. You think of all the eras you've seen: the Sumerian taverns, the Viking feasts, the smoky jazz clubs, the quarantine living rooms. Every one of them held the same heartbeat. The clink of glass, the shared sigh, the fleeting sense that in this moment, we understand each other. The drink was just a doorway. What waited on the other side was always the same: togetherness. Historians still argue whether humans drink less now than ever before. Maybe the numbers say yes, but the spirit says otherwise. Maybe we've just traded one kind of intoxication for another. Screens, algorithms, attention, all new bottles, same thirst. The need to feel something deeper, faster, easier. You find a quiet spot overlooking the water. The breeze smells faintly of salt and memory. You pour the last of whatever you're carrying, real, synthetic, or imagined, into a small cup. You raise it to the sky. This is for the first brewer who ever danced by firelight. For the poet who slurred their best line. For the lonely soul who whispered cheers. To no one and meant it. The liquid glows faintly, catching the last bit of starlight. You sip. It tastes like the whole story. Fermentation and failure, laughter and longing. Warmth spreads through you, not dizzying this time, but grounding. It feels like closure. And as the stars ripple across the sea, you hear a whisper in the wind, maybe from the gods, maybe from memory itself. You didn't drink to forget. You drank to remember. The waves hush, the world slows, and your eyes grow heavy. The long tale of human intoxication has circled back to its beginning. Not an ending, just a pause. The jars are empty, but the laughter still echoes somewhere in the night. You smile, half asleep, and murmur your own quiet toast to curiosity, to chaos, to every sip that made us human. Now, just breathe. Let the story fade like the last ring of a bell after a long night's celebration. The lights have dimmed, the tables are empty, and you can almost hear the faint sound of clinking glasses from centuries ago. Somewhere, the first brewer is smiling. Somewhere else, A modern bartender wipes the counter one last time. And you've walked through it all. Let your body sink a little deeper into the quiet. The air around you is cool now, soft, still humming with the echo of laughter and distant music. You can smell the faint sweetness of grapes, the sharp tang of hops, the mellow hum of time itself. History was never just about what people built. It was about what they felt. And tonight, you've felt it all, the wonder, the foolishness, the creativity that made humans pour liquid dreams into a cup and call it meaning. The waves slow their rhythm. The night folds over itself. You let go of the story and just breathe, knowing that for all our chaos, humanity has always known how to celebrate being alive. So close your eyes. Let the hum of the world cradle you. The glasses are empty, but your heart is full. Sweet dreams.